Can I get a second, please?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. With that, I'll take that as an approval of the agenda as amended. Minutes for correction, item C here from our planning meeting from March 19th, 2024. Anybody have any notes or changes? Seeing none, can I go ahead and just get a motion to approve with an aye for the minutes?
I can make a motion to approve the March meeting minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very
I'll
much.
second that.
Awesome. Everybody, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving down to general public comments, seeing the list here this evening, there is no one that has signed up that is not an interested party, I believe, that has an application before us. So, being no essentially signees on the general public comments, I'd like to go ahead and move forward. Closing general public comments, going down to old business E. Item E being old business, being none, moving on to F as amended. Text amendment number 1 for TA 0142024 schools and public facilities.
Thank you, Chair, Planning Board. During the 2024 retreat, the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners requested that the town land use plan address future school sites. Collaborative efforts with Union County Public Schools have been ongoing to identify potential sites. Once identified, this text amendment will be the catalyst to require the reservation of those sites as developments are proposed. In addition to planning for school sites, staff included the reservation of future public facilities such as police, fire, public services, and then reiterated the request for right-of-way reservations. So part 1 of this text amendment is to section 1.11. It's called Consistency with Plans and Studies. This statement is already in our LDC. In general, it is saying that the code's intent to implement infrastructure needs that are adopted in plans and studies. Staff is adding the language in bold to be more specific to include schools, public facilities, parks, and open space. The second part of this text is creating a new section 5.4. Again, we already have a general statement up front in our code. This first paragraph reiterates that all developments shall be consistent with an adopted plan, and then goes on about reserving rights for public schools and public facilities, and then the thoroughfares for rights of way. Under A, the complete text has been included in your packet, but A is basically a notification to the school board of education or town manager or appropriate agency when a development application comes in. B gives it 30 days for them to say yes to the reservation of the school or public facility, and then C would give 18 months to acquire the land once a preliminary plan or preliminary plat is approved. So your recommended action is on the screen, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor to any questions for this text amendment here.
The need for the changes, where'd they originate from? Just benchmarking against other communities, or was there a specific request from commission?
It was Board of Commissioners. Specifically, the mayor asked for us to address schools within the land use plan to identify school sites. We need the text to go with that for the ability to do that. Staff has met with the Union County Public Schools facilities planner. They have not identified any at this time, but once they do, we would amend that land use plan map to kind of circle certain areas that are identified. So once a development plan did come in, it gives them the ability to reserve for public facility or school site. And then the rest of the board agreed to put this text amendment in play at the retreat.
I think for me, I mean, this is a crucial next step to understanding where we need to go in addressing this, how we communicate even on addressing school needs. To be able to actually put that into an actual algorithm that could possibly help identify what may or may not be, not the impact, but essentially what may occur, and how to address what a community might be bearing for additional kids in schools, and to be able to look at it here through essentially a transparency statement of consistency with that it's consistent with our comprehensive plan, our planning goals. It's 100% true. We need to figure out how to address schools, and we need to take every step we can when we can to address the schools. And for one of the things I'd like to ask actually is within this plan or for staff consideration to also make sure that we're including adequate pedestrian right of way where we can. We have essentially a large population that is 100% geared around automotives and automobiles, but there is a growing need to making sure that we have near site locations that can be walkable for our kids too.
And the ordinance as written, and our current ordinance does give us the ability to either require the right-of-way be reserved or built when a development comes in, if there's a line on the map for a future greenway.
Well, I'm more thinking too, just even in the case of where they're near schools, can we make sure that maybe there's, instead of a 6-foot planter strip, an 8-foot planter strip? A little bit, especially near within a certain distance, a public interest distance. From
We can
the
look
schools.
into something like that.
That's more, within the, and we want to make that school walkable within the first, quarter mile, half mile, roughly?
Yep.
So just something that can we add is something to make sure we're taking that next step near our schools.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions? Sorry. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion? Can we jump back to a motion?
I make a motion to recommend approve the text amendment petition 2024 as written, and to adopt land use plan consistent statement as follows. The text amendment request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and future planning goals of the town of Waxhaw, and is reasonable in that it promotes the orderly development of the town to secure adequate rights of way or easements for street and utility purposes, secure adequate spaces for recreation, open spaces, and school sites for future facilities.
I can second that motion.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Going ahead and moving down to our amended item for conditional rezoning CD 0042024, the DeWitt applicant.
Thank you. This is a request by the applicant, the Wide Waters Group, for conditional zoning for 24.17 acres on the southeast side of Waxhaw Parkway. The proposed development will contain up to 312 multi-family units and 54,000 square feet of commercial retail. The proposed site is outlined in red. You can see the Waxhaw proposed parkway is running east-west. You have Providence Road running north-south. The property is currently vacant and zoned employment center. Land uses to the north are employment center, to the east employment center, to the south you have R3 in yellow. The brown is neighborhood center, that's the Blythe Mill Townhomes subdivision, and then in red you have commercial corridor. The applicant is requesting conditional zoning, which is a site-specific development plan with the ability to place conditions on the plan. The proposed development contains up to 312 multifamily units. Ground floor multifamily is allowed in employment center with a conditional zoning approval. The maximum number of dwelling units per the supplemental standards is 24 units per acre. In addition, the applicant is proposing 54,000 square feet of office retail. The employment center zoning is heavy on industrial and warehousing types of uses, so the applicant is requesting CC commercial corridor uses and NC neighborhood center permitted uses as well. Setback for employment center includes a 40-foot front setback. They were able to get that 40 feet along the multifamily section. However, they're asking for a 20-foot setback due to the shape of the lot on the west side. The site plan development standards and related graphics make up the proposed zoning district. Only minor alterations may be made in accordance with the LDC. Waxhaw's traffic consultant, Kimley Horn, has prepared a traffic impact analysis, or TIA, to determine required transportation improvements within the study area. Based on the analysis performed, the applicant is required to construct half the length of the Waxhaw Parkway. That's from Providence Road to Waxhaw Indian Trail Road. They would have to provide a new signal at Waxhaw Parkway and Providence Road, and then a payment in lieu for a portion of the NC 16 at 75 intersection improvements. If approved, they would be required to meet the design standards of Chapter 6 of the LDC. This is what they have proposed for now for elevations. The applicant has submitted conditions or development standards for this specific site. Their conditions or development standards are listed. Staff has added additional comments or conditions to their standards in bold. I'll just go over a few of these. Number 1, we already talked about. EC, it's heavy on industrial warehousing type of uses. They're asking for NC retail office uses and CC commercial corridor type of uses. Staff is adding that no residential permitted use by right, actually it's conditionally zoned, shall be allowed within the commercial retail portion of the plan. Number 2, we're just saying that it shall meet all landscape requirements of the LDC, not just for parking lots. Number 4, trees will be preserved or planted in accordance with the tree preservation requirement. There's a section in the middle and the southeast side of the plan that may be just brush type of vegetation. We're just reserving the right to go out there with the Union County arborist to make a determination if that should be preserved and mitigated per our fee in lieu. Number 6, they're saying to remove the 2 spaces per unit. That is one of our parking requirements. It is a pretty high requirement. Staff is saying that they have to meet a minimum of 1.5 spaces per unit in the residential portion. Number 9 talks about commercial uses not having to be established prior to the residential. And then staff is adding in bold at the bottom, we're looking for a right-of-way easement on the southeast portion of the development, and then that the ultimate parkway alignment and pavement section be approved by the town at the construction plan phase, and that all elevations meet the design criteria of Chapter 6. According to state statute, all zoning shall be undertaken in accordance with the comprehensive plan. This was applied for prior to the adoption of our 2040 plan. So we're looking at the 2016 bridge policy. Talks about mixed-use purposes. The designation provides for a mixture of commercial and residential uses in areas that are located along major transportation routes or strategically located to function as the center of a neighborhood. Talks about the allowed uses, including apartments, townhomes, duplexes, small single-family lot or assisted living facilities, and then light industrial also allowed in strategic areas. And then the recommended action, I gave you some options, and I believe Scott Stone is here and Brian Long to answer any questions, or Eric Candy to answer any questions, and I believe they have a short presentation for you all as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. Welcome. Please speak into the microphone.
I'm pretty loud, so I probably shouldn't get too close.
Not too close, but just close enough.
Well, thank you. My name's Scott Stone. I'm with American Engineering, and Eric Candy's with Wide Waters. Most of you, we've seen before the property to the south, and we had talked about how the property to the south, the Blythe Mill Townhomes, was going to connect into this corridor. So this is kind of that next iteration of what would happen up in this area. This is essentially it's an EC zoning, and it's got a mix of both uses. And we're going to walk through a couple of the key things that are part of this, and kind of how this is going to enhance both the transportation network and it's going to enhance the pedestrian network in that overall area. And just to refresh your memory as well, Wide Waters is also the developer that is developing Prescott Village, which had been kind of languishing for about 10 years, and they bought that recently, and they're bringing Lowe's Foods grocery store, which, just to give you an update on that, that's going full speed, and we're in detailed design is in review right now. So hopefully in the next 2-3 months they'll be breaking ground on the Lowe's Foods. So and I mention that in part because Wide Waters has their roots in commercial development. That's really what how they started their firm, and the majority of the development they do is commercial development in grocery anchored centers and other retail. So that's why this is a mix of those two uses as well. I want to talk about a couple of things that are important to as it relates to the rezoning, and kind of give some context to. I think when you look at the original rezoning of all this area, which would have been 2001 timeframe, I guess 2002 maybe, the EC zoning I think was looked at really holistically as all of those parcels together. And I think in a perfect world, the town would have liked to have seen all of these parcels, whether it's this tract, this 24 acres, the 500 acres to the north, the 100 acres, the belt tract next to it, all kind of one comprehensive plan. The challenge has been with that is these are all single individual parcels that are owned by different people, so it's a little herding cats to try to get everybody on the same page and same time frame. So that's why Wide Waters wanted to move forward with this project as it made sense to them. So, and you'll see a little more of that in a second. But a couple of things that have impacted this area, and how it impacts them as a developer is the sewer issue. There was going to be a line that goes basically straight to the north that Union County had proposed to put in to support SBCC, and then the Union County pulled that from their capital plan, so which is going to actually require Wide Waters to connect in themselves, adding a pretty extensive sewer line offsite to get the sewer connection in. So, which will be helpful for long term for other commercial developments that may come along later, or other impacts, but that could be served by that sewer line, but it is a big cost they're going to have to take on. One other thing is you probably already saw, and as Lisa mentioned, is the irregular shape of that parcel. It's just an awkward shape. There's only so much you can do with it. You can't put a big, huge footprint of a commercial building in there without, it just won't fit. So that's one of the challenges. Some of the things that will be as part of this that is kind of going into the whole mix to make the project work, that's driving some of the costs for Wide Waters is about 2,500 feet of parkway. That is the Parkway basically ends right now, you know, kind of near the west side of their property, and they're taking a whole bunch of extra property there. The off-site sewer I mentioned, and the traffic signal that'll be at the intersection there. So these are some pretty significant costs that help drive some of this. So I want to just real briefly and quickly go through a few of the, how this property is going to kind of help, continue to be a catalyst for some of the other elements. So if you see this property at the top and that kind of shaded orange at the top, it will be the new section of the Waxhaw Parkway, and then there will be a connection point to the south. And we're going to talk about the one of the other connection points that the staff that we've been talking with the staff about. But you can see that purple right there is the Blythe Mill townhomes that is probably under construction or about to be under construction. The CDs have already been approved and so forth. So that will be part of that connection to the north-south will be right there, up there. So it gives there will be then through that and through this track there will be a connection from the Parkway all the way down, parallel to Providence Road and NC-16 and Broome Street. So what this also does is you can see some of the dash lines are some future, Parkway future, how that will eventually come around, how South Cliff would connect in eventually. We thought it was important for you just to be able to see kind of holistically how this would all kind of be impacted. And just to talk about the Parkway for a second, I mean, it's been on the town's transportation plan for 20 plus years probably, and very little of it's been built. So this would get another half mile of a section built, and if they can continue to each project kind of can build a portion of it, then the town doesn't have to build it. You don't have to wait for NCDOT, which would probably be decades down the road. Pedestrian corridors, real quick, wanted to kind of walk through that as well, because that's as Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that connection point and being able to connect people, pedestrian, throughout the entire town. The yellow is an existing or will be an existing basically trail and sidewalk system that will connect the Parkway down to the existing sidewalk that's on Blythe Mill Road, and then that will be able to connect over to basically Providence Road, Broome Street section right there. What the applicant's suggesting is a multi-use path on the south side, so that dashed green line would be run basically the border of the property, and then on the north side you'd have a sidewalk fronting the property, which would go along Waxhaw Parkway. So as other developments come along, you'll see that the darker green kind of would connect, continuing going east, and then that thicker dash line would be the eventual greenway that's been planned by the town as well. So this is not any one project can do it all at once, but this is one more step closer, one more step in the process of connecting a lot of different things, not just by road. Wanted to bring up the one condition that staff had added that the applicant is not willing to accept is this connection point to the south. So that south, there is already that connection on the western side that goes north-south. The reason that, I'll give you a couple of reasons why the applicant's not willing to do that connection is, for one, the neighbors don't want it. So at the neighborhood meeting, the neighbors that live in that section specifically came and said, we don't want a road connection extending Blythe Mill Road up through your property. They didn't want that cut through traffic. There are only 3 houses there now, and it looks like on GIS or on a survey, it looks like a real road, but it's not. It's a paper road. Kind of where that arrow is from the schematic there is that there's a cul-de-sac there. So past that cul-de-sac, it's a gravel road that you can see I kind of have a call out there. It's a gravel road that connects 3 driveways, and with the trees in there and all those the existing situation, it would dramatically change those residents and how what we're doing there. So that's a big reason why not to connect it. There's also some grade issues that will impact it on the south side of this property. And then the third reason is we fully understand connectivity and why it's important, and we understand why staff wants it. The differences between this and a typical residential subdivision is we're not connecting a road in the residential section of these are basically apartments that you're dumping a road into a parking lot. So there's no real easy way to get through. You could get through, but it's not an easy kind of road like you'd have with public streets that are on a residential subdivision that need to connect their fronting lots. This is a different scenario. So the applicant's concerned about just traffic coming through, cut through, of an apartment complex is just not ideal in a lot of ways, and again, the neighbors don't want it. So that's why I thought it was important to show that, and why that is not something that has been kind of easily agreed to. I think you've already seen this. One I want to call out on the bottom, that's a representative commercial building. We don't know who the tenants are going to be. It could be a commercial, office use. It could be something retail use that's slightly different. So it will vary a little bit on that. But the residential at the top is more typical of what you expect to see on the residential piece of this proposed project. I think that is the last one. Do you have anything to add? I've talked too much. Any questions for us?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Greatly appreciate your time and coming before us this evening. I'd like to go ahead and open it up. Go ahead. Got any questions for?
Couple questions I have. I'm not sure it's for the town or for the developer, but just out of curiosity, you talked about the parking situation for the apartments. What about the park situation for the commercial? Especially since the commercial's kind of up in the air, because they're saying it could be anything. So how do we make sure we have enough parking if all of a sudden if it's an office and you got, whatever, 50, 60, or 100 people working there, and you got plenty of parking, or vice versa, the same thing of retail, that if you get some sort of a bigger store there that may draw more people, what's the parking situation? Because looking on the map here, it looks like there's not a whole lot of parking in the commercial side.
Sure. So we have parking ratios for individual uses. So if a larger 20, 30,000 square foot building wanted to go in there and they couldn't park it, it wouldn't be able to happen. You have to meet your parking ratio unless there's an ability to provide for some shared parking with another site, or if there's a daytime use on an office type use on the eastern side and there's a restaurant on the western side, you have the ability to have that shared parking, but they would have to meet our town parking ratios, otherwise the development couldn't happen.
Okay, but in the proposal, there's a specified amount of square footage for the commercial side. Mm-hmm. So how does this plan compare to what you require for the square footage that's in the plan?
Do you know what you're parked at here ratio?
Yeah, so right now, actually, I think last we calculated we had 5 more parking spots than what the town would require for this amount of square footage. So we're actually providing more. And I mean, just to answer your question wholly, we wouldn't put in less parking than a tenant would even want. I mean, they wouldn't go there if we didn't propose parking. A lot of times when you're working out these leases, they'll require us to have those parking spaces. So Scott alluded to, we've really cut our teeth in commercial. We would obviously work with whatever the tenant's requirement is for parking, and what we feel would benefit the development as a whole.
And also too, on the apartment side, you're cutting that basically by 25% what the requirements are for the town. How covered do you feel with that? I mean, if we have a guideline or requirement of 2 spaces per unit, and we're going to 1.5, I guess my concern is, if we have a 2, why do we have 2? If 1.5 is adequate, that's my concern. I mean, how comfortable should we be that 1.5 would be enough for this apartment complex?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I mean, we're not even comfortable with 1.5, to be honest. We typically aim for about 1.6 to 1.7, and 1.5 wouldn't even be the garages that we're proposing either. I mean, similar to that of the the commercial, we want our residents to want to live there, right? If you're living there and you don't have any place to park, you're not going to want to live there. That would hurt us. So we would be putting in more than 1.5 regardless, plus the garages.
I think also when the town staff first saw this, what we've been told is that that 2 per unit is actually something that is waived fairly often because it is a high number. It's one of those things that is probably higher than it needs to be for this kind of use. And I think sometimes the staff will look at that and say, "Gee, it looks like you have a lot of parking there, and it creates a lot more impervious. Can we cut the parking back?" So we were working hand in hand with the staff on the parking counts there. And two would be, there's apartments. You just don't end up having 2 cars, 2 people living per house or per individual unit, typically on a lot of these. So that's from all the other ones you've done before. That's that ratio that they pull from. So that's, I don't know if Lisa, you want to address that any further?
But because I'm kind of confused. If you're saying the 1.5 isn't adequate, then why are you submitting a plan that you yourself said is inadequate? I mean, at least the way Lisa's presentation was, you're presenting 1.5. If you're saying it should be 1.6 or 1.7, whatever it might be, it just seems like, shouldn't we see a plan of 1.7 if that's what you're saying is commercially viable?
Well, I think we're saying at least 1.5. The challenge gets to be is when doing the detailed design and you're looking at the individual layout and how you're fitting those spaces and so forth. It gets you're trying to fit every space you can to make sure you get as many parking spaces as you can. And this is an illustration, the schematic basically. It's to scale, but it's also it's hard sometimes to get every single space you're trying to get there. Now, if the 1.5 is a minimum, but again, I think the staff would push back if we had 2. I think if we're over 2, the staff might think that's too many, even though that's in the ordinance.
Also, we were on the original plan. This one shows 312 units. The original plan showed 336. That was parked at 1.5, and that's one of the reasons we reduced down to 312 was to get the parking ratio more in line.
So based on what you're saying, do you have any concern if we modified it to 1.5 is kind of the minimum versus 1.7 versus 1.5? If what you're saying that's what you're shooting for anyway, just to kind of put that as your minimum in your in the rezoning.
The challenge gets to be is if you set a 1.7 as your minimum, and then you're trying to fit all these and with the handicap spaces that might be required and everything else, and just how the driveways end up lining up with the detailed design, you may end up being at 1.67 or something, and then we don't meet their zoning requirements, and then we have to come all the way back through. Doing that gives us a little bit of a cushion to make sure that we can get over that 1.5 comfortably. To me, as Eric said, they want to get to that too, because if you've got some empty apartments that people are looking at renting and they can't find a place to park just to look at the vacant units, they're not going to move in there. So it's really everybody's got the same goals, because if you don't have no parking, it's not going to be successful.
When it comes to spilling out onto the Waxhaw Parkway or vice versa, the Waxhaw Parkway, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just one lane each way, right?
Currently, the future would be 4 lanes total with a median divided, but we would only expect the applicant to build the 2 lanes.
With that said, it's a pretty slim tract of land. Is there room for right-hand turn lanes? And
So if you see the top, look at the top left of the property now. So there's the existing Waxhaw Parkway was built much wider than 2 lanes. So and the right of way is already dedicated. So it looks like it kind of skinnies down, but that's only because the Waxhaw Parkway that was previously built was so wide. And I don't know how many lanes that would fit, but that's why there's only 2 lanes. But if you look at the actual right of way that's already been dedicated as public right of way, there's plenty of room for additional lanes and turn lanes.
and that would be something that you guys would be building into the development. That would go along with.
But not under this iteration, under this current plat, correct? Not currently. You would not
The turn lanes and so forth.
Yeah.
Any turn lanes that are required to go into the property, into those driveways, into the site would be incorporated in, but not turn lanes that might go to the north or other places.
Yes, but having a designated essentially, what's the standard stacking for a right-hand turn lane coming down off of 35 miles an hour? 100 feet?
100?
Yeah.
All right, so are we making, and John, you're heading down the right direction, because we're establishing essentially, are we getting enough setback currently right now with our road expectations to make sure that when we get projects like this that will be very condensed, that we're getting right-hand turn lanes into these properties and these 100-foot stacking needs to essentially, our parkway is supposed to flow.
Yeah, right. That's.
And we don't need, and we get it right now. It's going to start off essentially as a minimum baby road, but at the same time, your project's going to be here for X big number of years, and you're going to have to grow with us at the same time. But do we even having enough right of way currently with this project? Already knowing that we're giving up kind of significantly, especially where our commercial piece is very narrow. We having enough right of way there already. They're already asking for a 20-foot buffer on relief of our setback requirements for commercial. And in addition, Lisa, can you help? There's a big old note in their DeWitt proposal. There's a right of way agreement through the property. The commercial area proposed layout is contingent upon abandonment of the right of way.
And those are two separate right of ways we're talking.
Two separate. I'm not talking about your gravel road. I don't believe.
No, it's still separate.
It's something that the town doesn't have purview over, does it? We don't have the right of way.
We don't. There's an easement running east-west through that commercial portion that then goes north. You have
Where's the pointer thing?
here you go.
So actually, so you can see it. You can see where there's a gap here, where there's nothing right here. So there's an easement that runs basically here and up to here. That was there before the parkway was built, and it was and it's controlled by the developers to the property owners to the north.
Okay.
And because they were landlocked in earlier, but now they don't need it anymore. And the developer's been, trying to coordinate and has been in coordination
This year,
with the
herding cats.
a little bit, yeah. But,
Okay.
but they're going to want something rezoned probably at some point up here, so that's going to help. That's another good time to say, hey, you abandon that easement. They've expressed a willingness to do so. It's just making it happen and so forth. So there's no need for that easement to exist anymore because they have access to the back half of the property. That's that easement.
Sure, I can understand that, but essentially, to say it just forthcoming, our commercial is supposed to be first in this type of structure, from my understanding, from going into an economic activity, is supposed to come first above residential in this zoning code, but yet then our whole essentially, what is it, 54,000 square feet of commercial is contingent upon whether it's another property owner that is not essentially part of this proposal is okay with it.
Right.
That's a big ask for a planning purpose to take that leap, and so I don't. That's not even going through for me the numbers. I could dive 54,000 square feet compared to what you're asking for a possible of your residential build out at 10x. At probably ballparking it based off of your layout dimensions per unit, unknown based off of how many units you can go up for NC or not NC. They're not asking for conditional NC, or there are
How many
EC.
stories? EC.
EC.
Yeah. How many
5.
stories are proposed?
It really depends on the tenant, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the commercial.
For the residential. How many stories are you proposing for?
4 stories. Was that? I didn't see that listed. I saw 6 in their application.
Well, the
And so
photos for.
Yeah, the photo's 4, but in their application lists 6.
Yeah, so our code is 6,
Okay,
if
so
allowed.
I mean, just to have that right there, I would hesitate just a minute there to want to see a better plan a little bit there, especially in the residential area. That is a big number of residential for me.
So, just going back to this for a second. Again, the owner is going to have to build half a mile of parkway that's unloaded that they would prefer not to have to build, but they are willing to do so, which is a huge benefit to the town.
Sure.
And so that's a big extra cost to cut down on the number of residential units. You just can't afford to do any of that.
I'm also more worried about too, just balancing it out. That is a large aspect of total call out on of your estimated residential square footage build out compared to the commercial aspect, and then have the commercial aspect contingent. I mean, that part doesn't connect for me. So for me, just that alone right there, I can't support that.
I will say that the project doesn't work without the residential, because you just won't have the revenues.
You've got a large buy right that is contingent. Would you like the residential contingent versus the commercial contingent? I'm sure if you were going to pick one, you don't want your residential contingent. Why would the town want its commercial contingent? I'd like to go ahead and still open it up to anybody else if they have any questions.
Can I make one more point about that you had mentioned that in the employment center, the commercial users are to come first. I think the ordinance is actually written kind of vague, and I think they did it intentionally. I think the goal was at the time to not have EC be all residential, and to make sure that plans are put in that include both uses, and so because otherwise you'd just get a bunch of residential uses only. So that's why this has both on both sides. The developer's not proposing to have residential on the entire site.
Any other questions? I'd like to go ahead and...
Yep.
Thank you.
We also have Brady Finkley here with Kinley Horn if you have any specific questions on the TIA itself.
I just wanted to see.
Gotcha.
Brady, do you have a couple of snapshot points on the TIA that you wanted to maybe highlight? Cool. If Brady sees any intersections that, hey, when this may or may not come to fruition, here's a couple of intersections to be paying attention to, a couple of snapshots on that might be key on maybe how close do we need to keep our distance from our origin intersection of 16. I don't know. Is there something like that?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with John had a great point. So from a technical standpoint, from a TIA standpoint, we could not base the technical analysis on future Waxhaw Parkway extending because it's currently not funded, right? So turn lane warrants based on the existing Waxhaw Parkway doesn't warrant a right turn lane, but you have a very good point in the fact that if it does get planned in the future, that is something that should be thought of, that doesn't come up within the technical side.
And then where does that land come from, or how do you?
That can be a request from the town or NCDOT.
You'd have to bring it in from the setback. You'd have to take that area from the setback and carve out a paved right turn lane there.
There should be, that's a 110-foot right-of-way, so there should be room for, not for now, there's plenty of room for the turn lanes if you condition the plan on having those turn lanes now.
So the road would start more to the center of where a 4-lane would be, and then you move closer, so you're still preserving the necessary setbacks from the property. Is that what you're saying?
They could put the turn lanes within the existing right-of-way.
Okay.
Yeah, in a hypothetical world, you would lay out the 4-lane and then add a right turn lane and overlay the site, make room for that. Understanding it is a narrow site. You know, it may not be able to do that, but that's something that can certainly be looked at. And then
I know for me, that's more of what I'm thinking is if our true goal is to have it as an artery, you know, and built out as 4 lanes here in the future, at some point, somewhat near future, you know, having that additional right-hand turn lane as an additional element, you know, an additional stacking lane to make those right-hand turns.
that makes sense.
Thank you.
And then high level on from the off-site standpoint, the 2 main intersections will be 60 and 75, which we know is a problem, and then Waxhaw Parkway and C16. Start with 60 and 75. Really, their phase 1 was planned ahead of the currently funded HL 0115 project that is adding an eastbound left turn lane. And so ahead of that project, they had impacts that needed to be mitigated. Recognizing that project was going to come in soon after their phase 1, the idea there would be to provide payment in lieu for the town to go towards that project. The bigger piece from a traffic standpoint is 16 and Waxhaw Parkway. So without the connection of Waxhaw Parkway east to Waxhaw Indian Trail, they're really forced to use that intersection. Basically 100%. You might have some traffic that could trickle down through the Blythe Mill townhomes, but essentially 100% of their site traffic has to get out on 16 from Waxhaw Parkway. As it currently stands, it's stop controlled intersection. That really prevents some safety concerns, and so we're recommending a signal there to in advance of the U5769 TIP project that is planned to put a signal there. But really, what the analysis shows is that that intersection could not handle that traffic without the signal being there.
Sure.
Talking about 75 and 16, the question is, what's the tipping point? Again, you're talking about all this stuff happening for, what's the tipping point? At the point where you get to the point where you really can't grow anymore until that gets fixed. It's great to keep collecting all these fees, but it's just going to get worse and worse and worse if the state can't get around to doing its thing. We've noticed that with the 16 widening between here and Ray Road, it's, 4 or 5 years behind schedule? So what point does that bottleneck really limit what we can do as far as this traffic? Because it seems like we're shortchanging the community. We've worked collecting all these fees, but it gets worse and worse and worse because they finally get around to doing it. Love the money, but it could be 20 years from now before they get around to fixing that intersection.
That's right. You never really know. It's up to DOT and the funding. What I'll say with specific to that intersection is that the fees that have been collected through a few of these projects has allowed the opportunity for the HL 0115 project to be funded, and in fact, it's even been accelerated recently a year ahead of where it was currently planned. And so those fees currently are working to do that. It's in general you would prefer to do a holistic project, so you take fees from different developments and put it into one holistic intersection project versus doing band-aids, basically impacting the traveling public multiple times with construction impacts by putting band-aid fixes. And so there's no perfect, it's a great question. It's a very challenging question for the town. It's something we'll talk about here maybe later on tonight as well. But yes, there is a tipping point where we know that there's limited opportunities to fix that intersection. So
When's
what do we do?
the planned construction date for that?
Currently, it's 2028.
Which we're into both the left-hand turn lane in.
That's correct. That and the 3-lane widening from 75 up to North Church Street.
So based on what you're saying, though, you mentioned the left-hand turn lane could be funded basically from our fees we collected from developers. What about adding the lanes to go all the way to Church Street? Is that also funded, or is the 2020 tied to money coming from the state?
That's currently funded as well.
Okay.
They're part of the same project.
Ma'am, we typically don't allow public comment. It's up to the board to allow public comment. That's not a Q&A, but there is a public hearing at the board level, which would be in 2 weeks if this moves forward. So you will get notices sent out for that. And I'd be happy to talk to you after as well.
Ma'am, if you'll stay, we'd be happy to talk to you one-on-one afterwards if that's okay. We'll do our best to answer your questions. Greatly appreciate it, you being here tonight. Thank you. All right. I'd like to go ahead and maybe move down to recommendations on actions. We have a motion of favorable or unfavorable at our disposal here for this project. Charlie's jumping over to the mic. Charlie.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
You might want to go through the conditions and find out what is acceptable and what is not, so that your motion also includes all the conditions to be added. You've got some additions from staff, and you want to make sure that those additions are acceptable, and if they're not, they're not.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate that. Okay, so we have some conditions from staff that I believe needed to be listed out. And then I guess then it would also be in addition to condition for the proposed due to the right of way, the unknown right of way access and the current structure of our ordinance for EC corridor where commercial was intended to be a center point of the development of the conditional uses. That
Where are you trying to go with?
well, I'm just trying to see do I need to add in the additional right of way information into the conditions?
You would.
Or
you would have staff review the right of way, like before we make it to the next step. Review if there's a sufficient right of way for decel lanes for the proposed project.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So to add, there would be an amendment with John's recommendation for the decel lanes, and that where we have enough right of way access for those off of Waxhaw Parkway.
Would that be impacted if we made an unfavorable recommendation? List all this.
Yeah, that's
Charlie, if they're going to vote unfavorable, do they have to go through all these or just list?
do we just
a
have
few
it
reasons?
noted? Okay. We'll note staff recommendations and conditions, and then we'll make our recommendations. Okay. Then can we jump back to a motion here for unfavorable recommendation for CD 0042024 to the Board of Commissioners.
Just a curiosity, instead of being unfavorable, I mean, the question you raised about the contingency, if we took a condition that contingency's gone, I mean, I guess I didn't understand exactly what's unfavorable. Like for me, I was gonna amend the 1.5 spaces to 1.6, because it sounds like that's reasonable. And the question is your contingency on the commercial side. I guess I'm just trying to understand what's unfavorable about it, and we can fix that by changing the conditions.
So, personally, similar to what Daniel mentioned earlier, I don't think it's consistent with the plan.
Okay.
I mean, an employment center that may have residential
Okay.
or could have residential.
Which is, yeah, almost like an option.
And I feel like we're inverse here, in that we
Okay.
have residential that happens to have some commercial associated with it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just reading. You know, employment center zoning allows for development of larger scale businesses to provide employment and economic opportunities. 50,000 square feet is not larger.
No.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion for unfavorable recommendation to the Board of Commissioners.
And then
And
once
then the reasonable consistency would have to go along with it.
Yeah, I can do that.
So it's a motion for an unfavorable recommendation. The reasoning is the intent of the employment center is to provide commercial and employment type uses first, according to your guys's.
First and foremost, essentially.
Yes.
And so the consistency statement that it is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and not reasonable because, and then you can list your reasons, and it could be the same reason.
I think we're all in agreement that that the proposed at 54,000 square feet of commercial versus the estimated or possible proposed for the residential is essentially is grossly essentially yielding too heavy in the residential, and is essentially flies in opposite of what the intent of EC was or meant to be, and where and then layering on the additional piece where that there is an unknown easement where the current property proposal is suggesting the commercial to go to is essentially contingent on another property owner that has not relinquished his essentially his easement. I don't know. Yeah, I know. Sorry.
You was so moved.
Beat me to it. EDBs.
Do we
Do
need
they
to
have to
crystallize?
restate
Do
that?
I need to do that?
Charlie, do they have to restate that, or can they?
You've stated the reasons why it's not consistent. You made that a part of the motion. Everything that was said now conforms to what your motion was, and that's fine. He's got it.
Yeah, so I'd be looking for a second, my motion.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
We got a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have time for a 5-minute break before we move on to?
Your meeting.
Thank you.
request by the applicant Jones Homes for approximately 111 acres on what we call the Howie parcel, but this is the Emerson Park development. It is located north of the Waxhaw Animal Hospital and then south of the current Waxhaw Post Office. The proposed development will contain up to 759 units, so that's a mix of 420 multifamily, 220 townhomes, 103 single-family detached, 16 live-work units, and then they are also providing 121,000 plus square feet of commercial, retail, and office. To get you more situated with the site, you can see the primary frontage is on North Broome Street with secondary frontage on Waxhaw Marvin Road. So to the north you have the CC zone parcels along Waxhaw Parkway, which are the Dollar General, NTB, Tire, and then the post office. And to the east we have Town Center and R4 zone parcels. You have the vacant lots on Blythe Mill, the Waxhaw Animal Hospital, and then you have residential lots along Peyton, North Broad, and Bivens Street. To the south you have CC zone parcels, so that's going to be your dog care place and then the Waxhaw Rec Barn. And then to the west you have the existing Harrison Park subdivision zoned R3, and then the future Villages of Waxhaw project, which is zoned R4. So here is the site plan for the conditional rezoning. Again, this development will contain 759 units, which include 420 multifamily, 220 townhomes, 103 single-family detached, and 16 live-work. And then you see the 121,000 square foot of commercial retail along North Broome Street. So this proposed zoning will allow for multifamily, townhomes, single-family, and commercial uses as part of the mixed-use development plan. The site plan, development standards, and then the attached vision book and graphics make up this proposed zoning district. Only minor alterations may be made in accordance with our Land Development Code, Chapter 3. The proposed density for the R4, which is from this this connector here south, is what they're proposing for R4, and then the multifamily and the commercial is TC. So the proposed density for the R4 portion is about 4.27 units per acre, with the overall density for the site coming in at 6.79 units per acre. The R4 zoning allows for 4 units per acre with a clustering provision that allows up to 5. The single-family and townhome setbacks all meet the minimum lot width and depths using this cluster provision. So our traffic consultant, Kimley Horn, with Brady Finkley, is here, and they have provided a transportation impact analysis to determine the required transportation improvements within this study area. Data was collected to ensure the traffic created from this project will be sufficiently mitigated, and then based on the analysis, they are required to mitigate up to 19 intersections identified in the attached report. And so Brady, after my presentation, will give a presentation on those mitigations more specifically. So the Land Development Code requires squares, parks, and other forms of common open space intended to shape the design and character of a project. The applicant is required to provide 15.71 acres of open space, and they currently show 26.14 acres, which meets the 20% open space requirement for the R4 cluster, and then the 2% open space requirement for the town center portion. Accessible recreation spaces may take the form of trails, parks, plazas, playgrounds, and community gardens. The applicant is building 0.6 miles of Sunny's Way, which is this primary spine here as a part of the town's 2023 pedestrian plan. So this is going to be a future 10-foot greenway that will be dedicated to the town for maintenance as a part of our public trail network. They're also connecting two villages a Waxhaw trail system via 10-foot paved greenway, and then they're also doing 5-foot crush and run trails throughout the site, which will be maintained by the HOA. And then so this open space plan can be found on sheet RZ 2.4. During the construction plan review phase of this process, staff will ensure the common open space is arranged with landscaping and site elements such as fountains, seating, plaza space seating, and then pedestrian lighting. The town also requires a land dedication or fee in lieu for recreational purposes. The applicant is required to donate 1/35 an acre per unit in a major subdivision or pay a fee in lieu for that required space. Based on the major subdivision portion for 323 single-family units, they are required to dedicate 9.23 acres of recreational space. They have decided to dedicate 4.66 acres, and then they will do a fee in lieu for the remaining of that acreage at 4.57 acres. And then per state statute, that fee in lieu shall be based on the property's fair market value at time of final plat.
Madison, I'm going to jump in real fast here.
Sure.
Public recreational requirements, 1/35 of an acre. Proposed units showing on the count, for which this is part of essentially how we're going to be able to support our park systems, either expanding needed resources, services essentially, or the green space needed, which I believe we're still technically close to a deficit in our green space allocation for our town.
Sure.
And so my question is I see the proposed units of 323, and I know that there was a question regarding this allocation. Did I miss somewhere in the application? Was there the additional 420 units for the essentially the mixed residential in the TC area? Was that not in the packet for that one?
So by our ordinance, the park fee in lieu is specific to projects that go through a major subdivision process. So that would be lots that are divided up and then subdivided along public street frontage. And since the multifamily portion of that in the TC is not part of a major subdivision, that acreage or units is not accounted for in that park fee in lieu.
But it's conditional for us. Is that an option to be? I mean, we're looking at a very significant. In my mind, this is a major subdivision. Here, this calls for a significant growth of our town in a key area that is essentially in the heart of our commercial economic center. That's pretty major, in my opinion, of a subdivision.
So as part of the conditional zoning phase, planning board can recommend conditions that are amenable to staff and then also to the applicant. So that's kind of part of this process.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
it was just I know we had talked about it, and I know that there was, but as part of it, something that we can do here is, if we see things that are elements that could possibly be supported, there are plenty of conditions to make this a better and amenable for the public interest. But we'll go ahead and I know we have a little bit more with Madison, and we have Kimberly Horn here with our traffic impact study here.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. So a 25-foot residential buffer is required as shown on this sheet here. And as one of the conditions, where trees are disturbed in that buffer, the applicant shall plant 1 tree every 30 feet and then 10 shrubs for each tree in that buffer. In addition to our street trees, all single-family detached and townhomes are required to have 1 tree in the front yard, and then 2 trees in the side or rear yard, one of which being a medium to large maturing tree. The proposed development is required to preserve 30% of the existing tree canopy, totaling 22.6 acres. The applicant is proposing 11.63 acres of tree save, and then will mitigate the additional 11.05 tree save with additional plantings in coordination with our urban forester, with staff, and then an arborist, a certified arborist that they will retain for their development.
I'm going to jump in here real fast for something that I noticed here when I was going through the plat that I wanted to point out. With our tree save ordinance that was for our zoning, 22.6, 22.23 acres. We're at 11 and change, and I noticed several going through the essentially the provided documents. I counted myself. We're going to lose 22 heritage trees, I believe, on the site plan. That we're not either, and I get it. I just more wanted to point it out that there's always circumstances around the health of a tree, but at the same time to lose some of those heritage trees within our area and within essentially a key area of our downtown. That's never always a good thing.
Right. Yeah, we had started working with the applicant early on in the phase to get the site ready to take to BOC 2x2s, and then so after the fact we found where all the heritage trees were, which we had worked so hard already in the forefront with that. But yeah, there are several heritage trees throughout the site, and I believe they're preserving 2 of those, one on the eastern side and one central to the site. So these are this is a part of their vision book, and the applicant will go into greater detail with these elevations as well, but this is what they will be tied to as far as the vision for the single family detached and then the townhomes. And then here are elevations for the multifamily portion of the development. And then I provided just 3 snippets of their retail elevations. Again, they will have more in their presentation, and they're more in the vision book, which they will cover. So similar to the DeWitt, which you heard before, they had submitted prior to our adoption of our Waxhaw 2040 comprehensive plan. So this submittal is based off of our 2016 comp plan and then our 2021 land use map. So state law mandates that zoning be undertaken in accordance with a comprehensive plan, and that a consistency statement be prepared and approved for every zoning amendment, which that consistency statement is provided on a later slide. The 2016 comprehensive plan shows these properties as G3 intended growth sector, which is a designation intended to be applied to areas that have ready access to transportation and utility infrastructure that can support a large-scale and more intense urban design pattern. And within that subsection, it classifies this as mixed use and then residential. This designation for mixed use provides for a mixture of commercial and residential uses in areas that are located along major transportation routes. The allowed uses for this include apartments, townhomes, duplexes, and it includes light industrial uses, which may be allowed in strategic areas provided uses are conducted entirely indoors and external impacts are minimized. For the residential portion, it allows for mixable types of housing set in a walkable neighborhood setting. These include detached single family and then townhomes. Permitted densities for this section allows for 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre. And then for the 2021 land use map, as you can see on the left side of your screen, it designates this property as a mix of downtown and medium residential. The downtown is an area of town where a mix of retail and office, light manufacturing, and limited residential establish the historical and architectural identity of Waxhaw. And then the medium density residential provides traditional suburban style housing at a density of 3 to 5 units per acre. So in this process, we are at the conditional rezoning phase of this project. Upon approval, they will then go through a construction document phase with staff where we get more in depth with our review and then also our TRC review. A lot of those outside agencies are listed on this slide where we send it out to outside agencies, including Union County Environmental Health, Union County Public Works, Fish and Wildlife, Union County Schools, and then this is where the TIA is finalized with the town and with DOT and the applicant. So before you, I have your potential actions for tonight, and then the 4 conditions I have listed here. So condition number 1 will be multifamily dwellings shall be permitted as ground floor in the town center zoning. 11.05 acres of tree save shall be mitigated in coordination with us, Union County Urban Forester, and then their certified arborists. Enhanced screening and buffering shall be provided along the property line of Peyton Court residents. And then where the 25-foot buffer is being cleared for grading purposes, they shall replant that towards to be at the town standard. And then here is a consistency statement, so we'll be asking for a motion on it as presented or amended. And as always, any questions or comments?
Back it up one more slide, just leave it there for a minute.
I'd like to go ahead and open it up to if there's any questions for staff at this moment.
This has come before us before, and I know the question's been asked. And Rob, this is probably a question for you. The original zoning was for it was
I believe
easy. Well, give me the original zoning and the square footage for that again, because I'm trying to discern what the need is for the zoning, the rezoning requirement.
So
Yeah, so that's
I think we had two
Why are we
zones originally here in the application. We had essentially TC and R4. The pre-existing zoning. I think this is what leading John's question was. The pre-existing zoning for TC was 24.7 acres on the original, essentially the original existing zoning, with 80.18 acres being R4. John, feel free to jump in here, but I think your question goes into the increase of TC, 29.3 acres. So we've gone ahead and added in, just rounding, 5 acres into our proposed zoning boundaries. And I mean, I think this is what has led us to the catalyst of it's conditional.
Yeah, because I think, well, I didn't do the math in my head, but the R4 from the original would probably yield less townhomes and single-family homes than what we're looking at here.
That could be applied to the TC as well. The original 24.7 would yield less. What is that yield? Original yield is the original yield based off of the 29 or 24? What is the starting point? Maybe the applicant can address a little bit of that here.
Well,
jump in and.
I can start as well too. So the layout of the TC zoning and the R4 was adopted when we updated our 2021 land use plan. I think there was a plan for the site, so we kind of molded it to what that original plan was, and then what we foresaw as future TC. So they're amending it a little bit to encapsulate the multifamily portion of it. And so since they're doing multifamily from the first floor, that's why they're submitting a conditional rezoning application. The R4 portion they could do by right on its own, but they're trying to consolidate the commercial to one area, the multifamily, and then do the R4 portion. And you had mentioned EC. I think at one point we had talked about EC for the multifamily because the EC is the only zoning district that permits
Going vertical.
residential from the bottom floor, with typically employment as we heard in the last one, the employment portion is first and then the residential. So that was kind of maybe some confusion as well. So the request is for CZ R4 for the lower portion of the site, and then CZ TC for the Broome Street and then multifamily portion.
Yeah, and I can elaborate
Thank
real
you.
quick. Mark Heim with Silver Environmental Consultants. Good to see you all again. When we came back before you back in January, we at the time, I think we were requesting neighborhood center as part of the one zoning, and then we were changing the one land use to employment center. Following that meeting, we had some conversations with staff, knowing that the single family and the townhomes were by right if we just increased our lot sizes for some of the single family homes. So we found it was easier to redelineate the boundary between the R4 and the TC. Now, is it a one-to-one swap? Not quite. It's a little bit tailored to the layout that we have in our plan, but we tried to simplify it and we've got an exhibit when we do our presentation that really shows you where that existing line is and where we make that change.
Do we want to go ahead and move into their exhibit, or do we want to and have Brady hold off here for a minute, or do we want to? Sorry.
No, I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm okay right now. Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious, or if you had any additional questions.
No, we're not.
Perfect.
And I'm fine with letting Brady go, but we had certain points that were brought up regarding tree save and open space. It really kind of dovetails into what we're presenting, so I didn't know if you want to stop, have Brady in, or kind of get the answers to those questions.
Feel free.
Let's sequentially, whatever you guys want.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Come on up. We'll jump to your presentation, Brady. Thank you for waiting.
Sorry, Brady. Save the best for last.
So I'll go through what we changed real quick and then change it on everybody.
Yep, and again, this is Mark and then Rob as well.
You guys change order on us, we're going to change order on you. So thanks again. A lot of these images are images you've seen previously, but we took a lot of what came out of our meeting in January, the feedback we got from your board, from working with staff, just to make some changes to the site plan, trying to make sure we heard what you were requesting and see how we best address that. So this is the exhibit of the existing zoning we were just discussing, and then switching over to the proposed zoning. You can see outlined in gray where that delineation has changed. So we're kind of folding one portion of it over to the west in order to fit the site plan that we've created. Looking at the future land use plan, we're making the same change there. So it's a little bit different in terms of acreage, but it's nominally close, so we don't think it's a large request, which is why we're making the request. And really the request is to allow the ground floor multifamily that's going to support the commercial as part of this project. So when we start looking at our overall site plan and coming out of that meeting, one was the request for the park site and having a park site that was somewhere into this project. And does this have a pointer on it? Oh, okay. So originally we had, and another thing that came out of that was questions and concerns about parking, and as well as the unit count for the multifamily. So we started looking at how can we activate this town center area with something that unifies the community. We lost a couple of townhomes, we took out a couple of commercial buildings, we added some overflow parking here, and we created a flat green space that can really become a programmable space that's center to both the multifamily, the commercial center, and the townhomes. then using the natural topography, this area really just lends itself well for some sort of outdoor gathering amphitheater that we could place within this space. We also looked at the unit count. It was brought up that the unit count was a point of concern. Since that time, we've taken out this building here and converted that to townhomes. And then in our conversations with multiple different builders, we feel like the unit count, which was originally at 504, when we came before you in January, it dropped to 468. We've since dropped that plan down to 420. Now, this plan still parks at 1.5 spaces per unit at 468. Knowing that the buildings are going to change, but we're going to pick up almost 100 spaces in parking, we're going to be closer to the 1.7 to 1.75. And similar to the previous applicant, we make that request just based on our experience with working with multifamily builders in Charlotte, where 1.7 starts to get to the upper echelon of where we feel that parking threshold should be. After that, we start getting into a lot of excess impervious space. And with space being a premium in this project, that's why we're making this decision. So we've got some subsequent slides here that really start to show what this park space could be. We want to keep, previously we had presented the idea of incorporating the urban mill with the farmhouse look in all of our architecture. It's echoed in the vision book that we have, and start to, think about how these spaces could be created. And anything that we do in these spaces will be in conjunction with Parks and Rec. They want to be involved. We want them involved. We want the community involved. This area is about 1.5 to 2 acres, depending on where you draw the line of delineation. But then it feeds out and really opens up this space to any number of activities. And really it also becomes a central gathering point where a lot of the trails come in together. We've got a lot of the 10-foot asphalt trails throughout, but then we've also added a number of 5-foot crush and run trails. We've had discussions about programming elements along those trails. Parks and Rec doesn't seem to be too keen as far as taking over maintenance of that. Doesn't mean they can't be elements that aren't included as part of our package, whether we're talking trailheads, exercise stations, outdoor education stations. I think there's any options are probably still on the table. But as far as what they would actually maintain, we didn't include them in this package. Again, the incorporation of outdoor features such as using a grain elevator to become an outdoor fountain. It's just an idea that we came up with. None of this is set in stone, but it sets a precedent for the type of design and character and elements that really give a nod to the history and the nature of this project. So just a couple more images here about what we're proposing. This would be really along the street side near the town center. This is just a shaded structure. Again, these are placeholder elements, but could be incorporated, and by having them included in the vision book, it sets a precedent that gives the town leverage to say, we need to incorporate these certain elements as part of this project. We want this to be a great project, and so does everybody else. So, a couple more slides here. This is just looking out across the green down towards the amphitheater site, and then a lot of the rest of these are some of the town center imagery we talked about in terms of streetscape and ornamental plantings, and incorporating the type of architecture we want throughout this project. Some of this was incorporated in Madison's design, or not design, but presentation. And, again, we're still keeping all the other elements we talked about, a lot of the outdoor green spaces, common spaces, plaza spaces. We want to create something that's, while the central park would be maintained by Parks and Rec, the association would maintain all these other spaces that could be programmed for various different event spaces. Again, with the architecture, giving a nod to some of the architecture of downtown Waxhaw, the farm elements.
What do we call the Central Park portion of this project?
I don't believe the amphitheater area, I guess we could call that.
And that's what the city would be maintaining.
That's correct.
Well, Martin stole all my thunder. I'm Rob Kreischer. I want to introduce you to our Jones team. I'm with Jones Homes. I'm a longtime resident of Union County. Mark Kime, Mason Greason, who are our engineers for the project. Mark's been the senior project manager on the project since the beginning of the project. John Carmichael, just met Aaron tonight, so I don't know his last name, with Robinson, the law firm of Robinson Bradshaw. They are our land use attorneys for this project. And so what I wanted to do was really, I wanted to do something, briefly, I wanted to tell you how we got here tonight. And for those of you who've been on the phone with me or in a meeting with me, you're going to find it hard to believe that I do something briefly. But I have timed this, and I got it down to 7 minutes. You know, roughly a year and a half ago, this property, the Howey family property, was brought to me and asked if we were interested in developing the property. What I do, just to educate you guys, and you may have heard this before, is when somebody brings me a property, I look at 3 things. I look at the existing zoning, I look at the school system, and I look at sewer and water availability. And once I know what the existing zoning is, I have our engineers do a site plan for me, a by right site plan, so I can make a decision whether we want to move forward on that. So after doing that, we began negotiating with the Howey family, and roughly a year ago we went under contract with them. And we had a time period that we went through due diligence with them. We have passed that, and we are not in due diligence anymore. We have begun purchasing the property. So that's just to bring you up to speed on that. So over the last year, what we've done is we've had meetings with the planning board, with staff numerous times. We had a community meeting that was in November, which we advertised by sending to all of the surrounding residential owners. In addition, there were 2 signs put on the Howey property per town requirements, one on Providence Road, one on Waxhaw Marvin Road. And the night of the meeting, we had 49 residents attend the meeting. We recorded that meeting so that council could take a look at that. In addition to that, we've had discussions with council members. We recently had a discussion with Mayor Murray, and we wanted to take all that input and make sure that we were meeting the demands of what the citizens of Waxhaw wanted. Here's what came out of that meeting. We heard the following things. We heard that the citizens wanted a community that had paths, parks, and walkability to the retail space, which is really the definition of a mixed-use community. We were asked to reduce the size of the commercial facility. We agreed with that. It's currently roughly around 12.5 acres, or 121,000 square feet. 121,000 square feet. As part of that discussion with staff and listening to the members of the community, we were told no big boxes on that site. A big box to us is defined roughly around 40,000 square feet, which is kind of the size of a grocery store, to give you something to compare it to. So we agreed, as part of our conditional zoning, to let council, staff, and the planning board decide on the size of the different retail spaces. And we would make that as part of our conditional zoning. The goal is to have shops and restaurants and that type of community versus a big box and shopping center. A grocery center. The other thing that we heard was from our neighbors at Peyton Court. They asked us to make sure not to run the road, connect the road from on the site through Peyton Court and down to Waxhaw Marvin. We had already agreed to do that because I did not want to go through a fight anyway with the folks over there. The other thing that the folks at on Peyton Court asked us to do, which was Mark mentioned earlier, was to provide a buffer between their neighborhood and our existing homes there, which we've agreed to do. At our last meeting, John, you asked for us to look at a centrally located park, you and Daniel, centrally located park and an amphitheater. We've incorporated that into this new plan. You also asked us to take a look at reducing the multifamily, and what I did was I compared it with the by right plan, which somewhere around the 451 to 453, and we have taken it down to 420 to work within the envelope that exists there. I was also asked if we could put a lighted driving range on there, to which I said no. And I also was asked if we would consider not developing the property at all, which I said no. So just kind of recap real quick where we are. What I looked at the
Those questions didn't come from the planning board, though. Those were
no
questions in general.
Community meeting.
I want to make sure
Daniel
that
asked for the driving range.
everybody knows we're still of our sound mind. All right.
The last two questions did come from the community meeting that we had. So looking at our plan, what we were asked to do, we've reduced the size of the retail commercial. I've not had any discussion with any commercial people. I've received a number of phone calls, but I don't know what I have yet, so I've not had any discussion with them. We have, by right, we could have done 325 townhomes, 72 single-family homes for a total of 397. We reduced that to 220 townhomes and 103 single-family, which takes us to 323 total. And we are, it's easy to stand up here and say, the people, you want us to say what, or you want us to say what you want to hear, I guess, but this is a spectacular site. It's special, and we're going to make it special. We're a private builder. We can do a lot of neat things. We're going to design the homes for the community, which we can do. We don't have cookie cutter stuff. We design our homes. We're going to keep the farm theme in mind, as is the multifamily developer that we have been working with throughout this entire process was the 2021 National Multifamily Developer of the Year. So we want to do a classy site here. It's a legacy for us. I live in the county, and I'm very hopeful we get a favorable vote from you folks tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you very much.
I'll just add one more thing on the tree save. Since, and the heritage trees in particular, since that came about, we've had discussions with staff about switching to grading areas at 2 to 1 that are outside of lots in order to focus on tree preservation, especially heritage trees. I mean, that's going to buy us a little bit of room. It's a starting point. I would suggest, walking and identifying any of these truly spectacular heritage trees with, either Keith O'Haron or a local arborist, and seeing what opportunities we can to, even if it's just walling off a small area, there's opportunities, and it's something we certainly want to work through. So
I want to make sure we have a point of reference for some of the math from between this project that we're looking at here and the original zoning. When you're talking about the math and the number of residences, whatever form they're in, townhomes, apartments.
I think he gave R4. He expected his original yield to be 323.
Yeah. Well, I think where I'm going is that also taking into account we're going to give you fee in lieu so we can save that land for our multifamily residences. All that still applies, right, in your math? I mean, the fee in lieu, we're going to maximize.
So we were supposed to get 22, 23 acres of tree save. They're providing 11 and change
By code.
And in the balance, paying a fee in lieu. Is that it?
no, the balance for the tree save, we're going to mitigate, and we're going to replant at 36, probably in excess of 36 trees per acre. And that's something that it's one of the conditions that we committed to, that we would work with both the town, Keith O'Haron, the urban forester for the county, as well as a arborist of our own, to select ideal areas for those replantings. So the idea being, we want to reestablish any tree canopy that we're losing as part of this project.
Yeah, that's correct. They're not doing a fee in lieu for the tree save. They would be replanting.
But there's a park space aspect to this project that there's
Yeah,
fee in lieu
that's,
of.
yes. Okay, so you're talking about the park specifically, like the parkland dedication. Okay.
And that's significant, right? I mean, what's the acreage on that? The difference between
No, with the apartments included and without.
Well, I think
Is
the
that what you're
apartments are another 12 acres.
Yeah, I think it was 22, 23 acres with the apartments, and without it's 9 point something acres.
And then they've already part of this process for them, you know, and
Maximizing
well, then they're also essentially, you know, taking out and then mitigating back so they can grade. I understand that there's always site plan restrictions.
I
At
understand
the same time, it's a big swath of land to lose. And replanting helps, but it takes always. I recall back a heat map that was shown and how long it takes to replant those trees that once lost that canopy. That area automatically becomes 5-6 degrees hotter than surrounding areas with canopy. So the lose mature canopy always is something that we strive to do and mitigate to the best of our ability.
Well, and another thing to consider, this is not a 100% wooded site. It's about 50% agricultural, 50% woodlands, and a lot of that woodlands falls in streams and creeks where we can't really disturb anyway and don't have any plans for disturbance. The other areas really, I mean, we don't have a lot of buildable area. You know, if we start trying to save, if we start getting into that threshold of 22, 25 acres, it becomes problematic on a site that's not 100% wooded.
I think for me, though, I mean, the area that we did express in setting back, it essentially was a key area that was meant to add some dynamic delineation between the multifamily mixed use and the commercial aspect, specifically, hopefully doing something near that, I think, it's near where the townhomes replaced, and then there's the Centroplex area or the farmers market call out.
Yes.
In the commercial area on a commercial corner, which that worries me with essentially the placement of the amphitheater near a floodplain. Like going back to, do we have another sort of a King Creek problem where, hey, rains come just enough now, and with this all the site build out, we could now have a flooded amphitheater park.
That's a headwater. The floodplain is only on the very northwest corner of the site. I mean, there's no floodplain in that area.
Wonderful. But now, so that's point one. Point two is that amphitheater is now essentially, it is central. It's central to the road system. And we had pointed out an area that essentially kept it central, but also added essentially buffers and boundaries away from the traffic artery and the spine road. Now we have it centralized on the spine road. I'm not going to let my kids run around there. That's just my opinion. To run up to that park area near the essentially the spine road, where we were trying to have it a little more protected away from the spine roads to essentially be a value feature along with the commercial aspect. But again, you have essentially your yield plan. As you've expressed with your residential density, we've suggested some alterations to that. I think the amphitheater was a great feature, something that we were sought after. I just don't know if it's the ideal location that's actually as conducive for family activities as it might be presumed to be.
Can I ask a question? Who said that there should be less commercial space?
That's a good question.
Is it just because from an original comment that somebody made originally, they don't want to see a big box?
We've heard it both ways. We've heard people ask for more space. We've heard people ask for less space.
Yeah, because I don't think you heard the less space from the plan.
Well, we heard the concern about parking. So reducing some commercial, only 10,000, and then losing, as many multifamily units really helps lose parking numbers. That was such a concern the last time we were here.
Well, we had actually expressed adding. To the mic, please, Rob. Hey, Rob, can you get to the microphone so everybody can hear you? Thank you.
Yeah, to answer your question, the things I told you that we've heard, there's been all the meetings over the last year, the various meetings, not from the planning board necessarily. So, no, that's the compilation of all the different meetings that we've had.
My comment is for people watching at home and other folks to know that, those comments didn't come from the plane.
Sure.
Because if they looked at the previous meeting, we're asking for, I'd rather not see less commercial space. I'd rather see more land for the people to use. We're going to talk about walkability.
Sure.
But if you're going to talk about walkability from park space where the apartments are to where a park is, I mean, that's low on the walkability scale. You've got some park space over by the pool where the...
Yes, we have a central green there.
Yeah, central green area right there by the pool.
Yes.
But for residences of that
420
units,
dwelling units.
yeah, you were asking them to walk. I'm not talking. We're asking them to walk over a half a mile south of South Main to go to the park down there to do any, to have their park space. Really, I mean, you're not talking about all that much park space.
No, that
Where we are up in the commercial side, or there isn't any in the residential.
the park space
got this-
offered with
Large park space right here.
Sorry.
You have a large park space here. You've got a linear park space through here that connects all this to the commercial. And then this is very central to the project. When we add in on-street parking speed tables, this is a very low-speed traffic area that's meant to bridge a number of different users in one space. I think putting the green space central to just the multifamily and townhome users kind of ignores everybody else.
Understood. I guess where I'm coming from is
Our logic of where we came from as far as this.
that's great. We have codes on the books for a reason. What did we say? 1/35 of an acre for park space.
Correct.
yeah, 1/35 an acre.
So anything short of that, it's a fee in lieu, right? I mean, but there's reasons for having those codes on the book.
Yes.
And like what we said, once that land is gone and used up by a resident or even a commercial space,
It's never.
it's not coming back.
It's never coming back once. And
And so for the viability and the livability of that project long term, that's where I'm coming from. I think some of us shared those concerns in other meetings as well. So I just want to make sure I got that out there again.
awesome. Thank you, John. Ted.
Again, I'm waiting for the traffic study because I think that's going to be the critical
Yeah.
one.
That's what
Because we're putting all the challenges with-
I know. Yeah, that's what I'm.
And to me, that's more important than the green spaces.
I-
Where are these cars going to go?
Yeah, I think the traffic study is going to be the larger piece of this puzzle, but I think that there are some viability questions regarding green space issues, making sure that the additional 12 acres, if it is, depending on the pathway we choose to go for this recommendation, that if it must be conditional, that is clearly 420 dwelling units in my book, and so that park space that should be there, either A, supporting them, or B, we better figure out where we're going to need the park space to essentially accommodate that type of infrastructure need with that many dwellings.
Yep, I was just going to add, this is an extension of our downtown. This is where we have our urban core. I mean, besides the pocket parks, we don't specifically want a big, large acre park. We have one just south that we're building currently and about to open. So this is more of an urban infill type of development. So if you guys do, it's your decision, your recommendation, and the board's decision on that parkland fee in lieu amount. But they are able to, we could condition it on them, outside of the plan, or working with the applicant on that mixture of parkland fee and lieu that could come out of it. But I think there's some more concerns with traffic, so I'll let you.
I
Yeah,
agree
we
with.
can move on to traffic.
I agree with getting into traffic.
Sure.
So I'd like to welcome Kimley Horn,
Thanks, sir.
Brady.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the presentation here this evening.
Good evening, board. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me here tonight. Madison and Mark and Rob just did a great job of giving everything you need to know about on-site, and so what I will focus on is really the off-site impacts, specifically related to traffic and the surrounding infrastructure. And it is important to note, we went a little bit out of order, but it is important to note as a reminder, we performed the TI on behalf of the town, contract with the town based off of the town's TIE policy. I think that is important to note. We did talk about sort of covering what we covered last time. I think it's pretty much a lot of the same folks on the board in terms of the background and the history on the TIE process. I'm happy to sort of cover that in high level. We've got some slides, or we can jump right into the TIA.
We could jump probably right to the TIA. I think I'm good there. Thank you for checking with us.
No problem.
You did.
As we go through here, definitely ask questions. It's a very involved project, as you know. It's a pretty large report, and so the idea here tonight is give you a high-level overview. But I want to make sure that I answer any questions to make sure that y'all have the information that you need to be able to make an informed decision tonight. And so as we walk through here, we'll kind of jump through the TIE process, which is really, if I simplified it, is looking at the existing conditions, what the existing traffic is today. Then we grow that up to a future horizon year, which is what we call the background non-project conditions. You then add the site traffic on top of that, which then gives you your impacts, and then you identify mitigation based off of that. We'll walk through that here tonight. I do like to at least start with this reminder of what the purpose of a TIA is. It is, by definition, through the town's TIA policy, is to evaluate and identify the incremental impacts caused by the proposed development, and to identify mitigation improvements to offset those impacts, consistent with the town NCDOT mitigation requirements. The purpose is not to correct existing deficiencies of the transportation system. However, the existing deficiencies do play a part in the impact that is that is provided by the proposed site, and some of those improvements do offset some of the existing deficiencies, as we'll see as we get through this. All right, so the Emerson Park TIA in general, the site does trigger the TIA thresholds met for both the town of Waxhaw and NCDOT. As a reminder, the town of Waxhaw's TIA thresholds are at 100 peak hour trips or 1,000 daily trips. NCDOT's is at 3,000 daily trips. It triggers both, I think, straight from phase one. The TIA analysis was performed, and then mitigation was identified based on both the town and NCDOT's requirements. We had NCDOT with the local office and congestion management, which is the unit in Raleigh, involved in approval of the scope of the TIA as well as the TIA review, and it has been submitted. The signed and sealed TIA has been submitted to NCDOT. It's currently going through the review process, which is up to 60 business days. 40 business days, which is about 2 months. And so it is currently in review by NCDOT. All right, so we based the TI based off of looking at 3 phases, and really I'm going to put these into 2 buckets. The first 2 phases were prior to U5769 being in place, which is the NC16 widening, and then as indicated by the applicant at the scoping meeting, phase 3, which is the commercial portion, they indicated that would not be constructed until 5769 improvements are in place, and that's really because of the density, the magnitude of traffic that is generated, and the lack of capacity currently available on 16 until that section is widened. We have been talking about, through Madison's presentation as well as through the applicant's, a little bit lower density and a little bit different site plan than what the TIA was based off of. The TIA was based off of an initial site plan that was provided when we originally scoped this. It had higher commercial, I think 131,000 square feet versus 121 we're at, as well as residential was higher at, I believe it's 824 total, and currently it's a little bit lower than that, I think 700.
Yeah, 759.
759, yes. So the impacts we'll be talking about tonight is based off of the higher, but generally in line with what's being proposed. Okay, so we already talked about the TIA process. We'll jump into existing conditions. Traffic counts were collected in May and October of last year when school was in session. It collected vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles. As you can see on the screen, these are the study intersections. So really, if you look east, it goes over to, let's see, here we go. So over to the east at Old Providence and Waxhaw Highway, carries over to the west to where the future Waxhaw Parkway / Helms Road is currently being constructed to bridge over Waxhaw Highway and connect into Waxhaw Highway, and then up to the north, up to Alma Boulevard. Okay, and then we jump into background conditions. When we look at projecting growth absent, so independent of the proposed site, we really look at two buckets. One is non-specific growth, and that's really a regional growth based off of the annual growth rate that is independent of the specific growth that we'll talk about in the second bullet. And we chose 1.5% per year based off of the past traffic patterns, as well as consideration for the second bucket here. The second bucket is specific approved developments that I'll show a map here in just a second. So when you add those together, it came out to about 6 to 7% per year up to 2027, which was phase one. And then if you extrapolate that up to 2032, it comes out to about 3 to 4% per year.
Brady, can I stop you there? NCDOT typically looks at 2% per year on their traffic analysis. Is that correct?
It's case by case.
Okay.
So here are the 7 approved developments I just discussed that we included in our analysis. So again, this is accounted. Basically the traffic from these 7 developments were added on top of the existing counts to project future conditions, and that is Cottage Park over here next to Helms Road, Rome Creek Station south of Waxhaw Highway, the Preserve at Forest Creek down to the south. 2 of them over here, Rogers Pond and Seven Hills, that are east of Old Providence Road, Old Town Village, and Blythe Townhomes that are northeast of the downtown area. We have a number of TIP projects that are currently funded for construction, which is great in this area. And so we have, I think, 4 total, and we had 2 that were assumed in phase 1, and that would be P5748, which is the NC75 and Helms Road grade separation. So they're removing the current at-grade crossing of Helms Road, bridging over NC75, and providing an intersection at NC75, and as a part of that, there would be a roundabout constructed at existing Helms Road and Waxhaw Marvin Road. That's currently under construction and currently funded to go through 2027 construction. Next one is down to the southeast, this roundabout at Old Providence and Waxhaw Highway. There were a couple of other developments that also provided payment in lieu to help fund that project, and it's currently funded for in the STIP for 26 to 2028. However, the latest I've heard is that the way the NCDOT is going to try to construct that is by ripping the Band-Aid off, which is as quickly as possible, closing down and trying to get it done during a summer, that summer being either 2026 or 2027. So sooner than 2028, although the funding goes through 2028. So because of that, we assumed it was in phase 1. In phase 2, we have what we talked about earlier, which is HL 0115. That project has recently been added to the STIP, and since then has been accelerated a year, which is great. That is widening Broome Street from 75 up to North Church Street to a 3-lane section, as well as adding an eastbound left turn lane from Waxhaw Highway onto Broome Street, which is, we've seen for a while, is much needed. Will provide quite a bit of additional capacity. That one's currently funded for fiscal year 2028, so we included that in phase 2. And finally, U5769, In phase 3, that is the NC-16 widening from Ray Road Extension all the way down to Waxhaw Parkway. It does kind of overlap with this project in a sense because the commercial driveway, the right and right out, is kind of right midway through here. If you kind of envision U5769 being widened from 2 to 4 lanes, so that second southbound through would come through Waxhaw Parkway and then taper down from 2 lanes to 1 lane, pretty much right at that driveway. And as you'll see, one of our recommendations is just to continue that second southbound through lane all the way down and drop it at what we would recommend as a signal at Blythe Mill and the Howie connector. Okay, so now we'll talk about the actual site traffic. We have, in the first phase, we're looking at what we call it Howie connector. And again, reminder, this is a little bit different of a site plan, but the site access points are still the same. That would be the Howie connector here at Blythe Mill. Blythe Mill Road is proposed to be realigned to a line directly across from the Howie connector, and that's proposed to be signalized. Number 2 is down at Waxhaw Marvin Road, and that per NCDOT is recommended to align with the Town and Parks Rec Center. Number 3 is the North Broad Street extension, which provides direct access into the downtown area, so you have residential being able to get to the downtown commercial without having to get out onto the external roads, which is a good thing. And then we talked about a ped-only connection, as I believe Mark or Rob mentioned earlier, to Peyton Court. Phase 2, we have basically a cross connection into Lindsay Center, which is along Waxhaw Parkway, so it sort of gives some of this multifamily indirect access to Waxhaw Parkway. We also have a couple of cross connections into the villages of Waxhaw, I believe it's called. And then finally, phase 3 is when this commercial comes online and we have a right and right out access to NC-16. Trip generation, looking at three phases. Really, I'll kind of highlight the AM total and the PM total. So for phase 1, 428 units, 215 AM peak hour trips, 276 PM peak hour trips. When we add the second phase, reminder, this is cumulative. So this is not just phase 2. This is phase 1 plus 2. We increase that to 356 trips and 456 trips. And then we add the commercial. That increases up to 881 AM trips and 1,087 PM trips. Once you add commercial into a residential, more of a mixed-use development, that's when you get some internal capture, which is great. So that's basically trips that would be generated to a commercial site on its own that is internally captured with the folks that are going to be living there. So they don't have to actually get out to the external streets. There's going to be some attraction between those mixture of uses, which is something from a planning and traffic perspective is a benefit, as well as pass-by. So when you have commercial development, pass-by is that traffic that is already along those roads that are not being generated to the network because the site's there. They're already there, and they're just kind of pulling in to that commercial site and then getting back on their road or on their way back home. All right, and then we'll jump into mitigation. So of our 14, and I'm calling 14 study intersections, as part of the TIA, we had 19 intersections, but a number of those were internal. But because some of those intersections are kind of different from what's being proposed, we're going to sort of forget about the internal intersections tonight and focus on the 14 external intersections. So of those 14, there are 9 of those intersections have been identified for mitigation. Phase 1 and Phase 2 specifically are these highlighted in red. So you'll see NC-16 and 75 up to Howie Mountain Road, up to the main connection at Blythe Mill, and then along the southern portion of the site, as well as the future connection of Waxhaw Parkway into Waxhaw Highway. This is generally what that for Phase 1 and Phase 2 those improvements look like. So, big picture, it's looking at providing a payment in lieu at 16 and 75, and that's really because their development is coming in basically right before the phase one is coming in, right before the eastbound left turn lane is in place, and so we wouldn't want them to build a left turn lane, which is going to be built by NCDOT anyway, so that payment in lieu would go towards that project. A westbound right turn lane from Hallymount Road onto North Broome Street, and then this is really the major intersection. We do need to have that signalized for safety and for capacity reasons, as well as multiple turn lanes, and as we talked about, realigning the Howey connector to tie, or realigning Blythe Mill Road to tie directly into the Howey connector and improve that that skew that's currently there, to tie it in more at 90. Now on the south side, it would be improving the southern section. I think it's about 500 feet of North Broad Street. If you're familiar with it, the northern portion of North Broad Street has recently been improved with the apartments there. They have on-street parking, I think 20-foot width with curb and gutter. But that southern section is pretty narrow, about 15 feet wide, I believe. And so with added traffic along North Broad Street, we'd really want to really need to extend those improvements down to North Main Street. A left turn lane here at, this is Rehoboth and North Main Street, so picture the railroad tracks here, very short distance here. If you've been in this area, you might be familiar with, because of this distance here, this traffic kind of backs up coming off here, and it's really hard to turn left. And there's not a whole lot of left turners. It blocks the through traffic, and so by providing that left turn lane, it at least allows a safe space for the left turners to get out of the way of the through traffic, which provides significant benefit. Then finally, at this intersection of the future intersection of the Waxhaw Parkway or Helms Road at NC 75, it'll be providing an eastbound right turn lane. And so a number of these projects sort of overlap with the TIP projects. It would really be ideal for the if this does move forward, for the developer to work with NCDOT in the town to see if we can incorporate those improvements into the design and construction of those, so we're not going out there impacting the traveling public more than we need to.
Sorry about that. I want to jump over to the Rehoboth Road intersection and Waxhaw Highway. I know that there's some future road improvements that's already supposed to be a signalized area, but I was surprised that there was no mitigation in that area for this project, for its size and location, knowing that we have to either go up and through the commercial piece or for the residential. I mean, that's going to be, I figured, a lot more traffic on Waxhaw Marvin, possibly impacting those two crossing points where they go at grade over the railroad tracks.
Sure, yeah, great question. So I'd say three things come to mind. One is that the preserve at Forest Creek is already planned, required to put a signal in there, so we assume that was in place. So the intersection is assumed to be signalized already by that development. We do have an improvement in phase 3 that we're recommending, so we do have an improvement at that intersection, and that's a northbound right turn lane. And the third thing is really this piece, P5748, does provide quite a bit of benefit to this sort of constrained and challenging area, because once you have that direct connection that you can use Helms Road or future Waxhaw Parkway to really bridge over NC 75 and not cross the railroad tracks and tie directly into Waxhaw Highway, I do think it would take quite a bit of traffic that's really choosing to use one of these two that neither one are ideal, would probably pull more traffic onto that Waxhaw Parkway.
Got it. So just to highlight then how even more important, the Parkway, and that would be Parkway West would be to tying in these future growth strategies, and that overpass that essentially goes over Helms Road to 75 will essentially be a mainline artery to move traffic away from these old school T intersections that weren't designed to move people very well.
Absolutely, yeah, and even more so if that little missing piece in between here gets connected as well. That'll be big. So between the existing Waxhaw Parkway that's kind of ties in and stops here, and where NCDOT is terminating their project, there's a little missing gap there that would be a big help as well.
On the North Broad improvement, how much wider is it? It's 15 feet now. What would you recommend? What's the recommendations for us? How wide would that come? Like how much space? Because there's old houses there. There's not a whole lot of space right there.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the point of determining what that is. Just realizing that you ideally be consistent with what was just done just north of there, and so just north of there, I think it's about 20 feet wide. You have on-street parking, you have curb and gutter, you have planning strip and sidewalk, at least on the east side. It's up to the town on what they want to see there, but I think that's probably be a start to see if that can fit, and then work through the right-of-way constraints.
Yeah, because where the apartments were, there was kind of open area. Here, where you're coming through, you got 120-year-old houses that are right there that you're coming through. So it's a whole different part of Waxhaw.
Much different, and that's my guess is that's probably why it wasn't approved, is because that was more challenging than what the northern portion was to be done.
Any other sites that you felt might be necessary to highlight here on this slide?
Not on this one.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. And then phase 3, so this is after 5769 is in place, and this is with adding the commercial. These highlighted in green are the intersections that we have identified mitigation for. We'll start down on the south side. So this roundabout that's planned, U6248, with the added traffic, it really pushes it beyond what the volume to capacity threshold that you like to see with a roundabout, and so we identified mitigation for that, which would be a northbound right turn lane, and ideally coordinate with that TIP project to have that incorporated. This will be the big one, NC 60 and 75. So there's pretty significant impacts at intersection with this site. There are limited options that you can do. One thing that, from a pure traffic standpoint, that does a pretty good job would be, you may have seen this before, but is basically, restriping the southbound approach, which is only 2 lanes. You really can't widen it any further because of a lot of constraints there, to a left and a left through right. So you have dual lefts coming south. It's really facilitating that heavy movement that's kind of going through downtown. This part is actually not the big deal. The big impacts is the second receiving lane that you need to receive the dual lefts, which you have on-street parking, you have historic buildings, you've got sidewalk that is at a different elevation than.
Then you got CSX on the other side.
Yeah, CSX on the yes. There's a lot going on there. This concept was actually brought as an idea through the Union County Critical Intersection Analysis that was evaluated, but not moved forward. Lisa or Madison, I'm not sure if y'all know if it was the town, NCDOT, and everyone involved that said no, or if that was just a town decision, or essentially it was not moved forward because of some of the impacts that we just talked about.
Yeah, so I think we took one morning and ran that simulation ourselves, where we closed down the street and we had public services trucks, town vehicles run that movement, and I think that was the town deciding not to do that. It was it felt unsafe for the pedestrians, especially with bigger vehicles, and so we made that decision not to do that.
Okay. Yeah, pet safety, and that critical intersection, double movement, that could get tricky with where you're having a lot of walking, family age all the way up to adult, and how do you do that with big rigs in commercial traffic as well, with the double movement?
Exactly. Yeah, if you've been downtown anytime recently, you see the dump trucks and the 18-wheelers that cruise through downtown, especially trying to make a southbound left they take a wide turn, and sometimes they get stuck in the intersection with a on-street parking there, so they have to kind of maneuver around that.
Yeah, and it really goes against the vision of the town, which is to make the downtown area more pedestrian friendly. By adding dual lefts, that's not typically thought of as improving pedestrian safety and connectivity. So,
So in short, there's quite a bit of impact that is going to hit this North Broad Street with this application just by itself.
well, Broom Street and Waxhaw Highway. Yeah, and really, that's you're about maxed out without taking some buildings and doing some major infrastructure needs there. So what it really leads to is the idea of, instead of building this intersection bigger for cars, you just need to take more cars off of it. And the way to do that is extending Waxhaw Parkway over to the east to Waxhaw Indian Trail, and ideally, all the way down to NC 75 in the future. It's really the only way you're going to take traffic off of here. And so, because of that, that's where you see the recommendation here is, once we go to phase 3, that pavement in lieu would be more geared towards the Northeast Parkway, and not just another intersection project here, because there's really nothing else that you can do at this point from a capacity standpoint.
Just a question for payment in lieu, though, you would structure it as if what would be the cost of mitigation to essentially accomplish that hypothetical goal. But so payment in lieu, would that be structuring with right-of-way easements and stuff like that in that area?
That's to be negotiated, yeah, to be worked out.
To be negotiated with conditions.
That's right.
When you talk about Waxhaw Indian Trail, I'm kind of curious, because the way it goes right now, it turns into Howie Minor, which dumps right back into 16. So is a plan to cut it through to 75 and to take that, and actually Howie Minor then basically split somewhere before it gets into Waxhaw, down to Waxhaw?
Yes, the real fix is to take it all the way to 75. If you get to Waxhaw Indian Trail, you'll take some traffic off, but the real fix is getting all the way to 75.
Yeah, because I don't see it really saving anything, because it doesn't go anywhere.
There's some other kind of streets you can kind of weave back through. I think McNeely gets you over there, and then blinking on the name of the other street, Collins.
Lisa, what was our origin and destination study? 84% or 64%? 64%, 65%? Do not originate in Waxhaw, nor we pass through us, essentially.
They're forced to go through there. They don't really want to. They're just forced to.
They have to go, because there's not much of a diversion or secondary option for them to pick.
That's right. All right, and then still sticking on phase 3, as we move up to the Howie Connector, we've got some additional improvements there, and that is where I talked about earlier about extending the second southbound through lane from the U5769 project all the way down to drop as a right turn lane at Howie Connector. It also provides additional capacity at this right out driveway. And then as we move along over to Rehoboth in North Main, we have another improvement in phase 3, which is the right turn lane. That's also to kind of provide some relief for the traffic that extends back in the short little distance. We also just discussed an additional right turn lane at the Rehoboth signal at Waxhaw Highway or South Main Street. And then finally, there it would be signalizing this future intersection of the Waxhaw Parkway at Waxhaw Highway. And then we have improvements at the actual driveways. With that, I have slides that have detailed reasons, as we've kind of talked through with the previous one. Has all the reasons why we came up and how we came up with our recommendations. We can talk through those, or I can stop here and happy to answer questions.
Also, too, just curious, when you talk about traffic, how do you play into the concept of there are trains going through Waxhaw? I mean, what does that do? I mean, because right now the town's cut in two when everyone comes through. So how does that factor into your traffic mitigation as far as the amount of traffic that's got to go across railroad tracks, knowing that 5-6 times a day, it's going to be shut down for 15-20 minutes, whatever it takes these 200-car trains to go through town?
Yeah, It's a great question. It doesn't get factored into the traffic study mitigation too much because, one, it's not really the impact of the site, and there's not really anything that the site can do, but it does play into our existing conditions. I talked about how we first collect the existing conditions, traffic, the queues out there and calibrated to that, so it's factored into that. But as a reminder, the TI is focused on the AM and PM peak hours. I know sometimes it does hit that peak hour, which is Armageddon, but generally I think it stays outside of those peak hours.
Can you roll back one slide to going back to the Rehoboth, and then I guess it would be North Main Street and Rehoboth crossing, and maximize right-hand turn. I know that area has some pet problems as well. I think there's some irrigation or some
There's a big drain right there with some railing.
Yeah, big drain and railing. And so my ask was essentially how much stacking did you estimate that would need to be mitigated?
Yeah, and to your point, I was trying to pull up that pictures. Yeah, so you have some utility issues right there that impacts your ability to really provide as much storage as you would like. Ideally, from a traffic standpoint, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 425 feet is what it was showing. So that's why we said maximize it, because it would be a challenge to get this. In reality, most of the traffic is more traffic than not is turning right, and so if you don't, it's not a safety concern. It's really just more of a getting out of the way to allow through traffic to go.
Allowing traffic to have movement and flow.
Correct.
And how can we get those essentially into stacking lanes to essentially allow that double right-hand turn for most people that are probably going back out 75 to 521.
Right.
So, or hopefully in the future using our bypass and overpass over on Helms Road.
100 feet is needed now.
100 feet is needed now.
What happens when you put all these cars on the road with this project? You have to maximize the heck out of that.
That's where the model is showing 425 feet.
Okay.
What it
all
needs.
right.
425 feet is the model, and we can, and because of utility restrictions, we've got 100. So we got to do the best with what we've got.
Well, when a train's there, and people still want to continue down Waxhaw Marvin Road,
When I drop off my kid
they're out of luck.
Yeah.
That's why we're saying maximize, because for that reason, that's where if you just can get people out of the way, you can allow traffic to still flow.
Yep.
The more you get, the better it is.
Anybody else have any questions on traffic? It was as much as I thought it would be for this project in this area. This area is going to be heavily impacted with a large amount of vehicles and vehicles looking to travel amongst our town and outside of our town to neighboring municipalities to shop and do other business. And so this will, but clearly downtown will feel the full force of essentially a density possibly coming into our community. Is there anything else traffic oriented that you wanted to maybe raise to our attention?
No, like I said, I have really detailed slides if y'all want to get into it, but I can stop here.
I think we're at a good spot for stopping on traffic, unless there's something specific that comes up in conversation.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation this evening.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Really thorough. Thank you.
Yeah, is there anything else you guys want to discuss at staff level based off of my presentation, the site, or anything additional for the applicant if interested?
I know for me, the applicant was kind enough, he gave us some numbers here, such as maximum dwelling count that he estimated on the original 24 acres, 25 acres, to being somewhere up to about 504 his original proposal that we first saw was, I believe, around the 460, and now he's at a dwelling count of 420. For me, the way I'm looking at it is if we were talking maximums, I believe that the applicant originally said when they first gave us a preview that our maximum commercial square footage would yield somewhere between 225 to 250,000 on a maximum. They're using maximums on the dwelling units for for their mixed development on the site. For me, the way I look at the density, especially within the site of the TC conditional zoning district, at being 24.81 dwelling units an acre on 16.93 acres, I find that density to be not in the public interest of the town of Waxhaw at this time. That is a massive number for dwelling units an acre when they've already removed roughly 48% of our 250,000 square foot of commercial on the by right side. We're at a 48% reduction. The applicant is proposing essentially and requesting that we condition intake reductions of commercial. At the same time, he has given back very little when it comes to essentially what I feel is essentially the biggest hurdle for the project is essentially the total dwelling count of his mixed-use family district.
Yeah, I came at it, I think, a little different way, but similar concern. I think I heard number 6.7 was the density.
For the overall site?
For
Correct. Yep.
Start big picture. And, land use plan 2021 is 3 to 5. And I know it's not like for like, but it's the intent was that to be medium density 3 to 5, and we're talking almost 7. Right. So, to your point, Daniel, it ain't quite that granular numbers. That's what I thought that we're heading from, but that's the challenge I have is the intent is obviously with the 21 plans to be medium density. I feel like we're above that.
Yeah, kind of tying what you're saying. I mean, my concern is that I probably could get comfortable with density, but when you throw the traffic on top of it, I mean, I feel sorry for them in the fact that we got this traffic issue, but it's there, and we have a messed up from perspective downtown being able to handle the volume. We're basically talking about tearing up potentially these old houses on Main Street to make room for this widening. And we're changing the character of the town. Potentially, and I guess that's my only concern is the density is it's just making it worse. I mean, and that's my biggest concern is it's one thing if the traffic was not so bad, but now incrementally we're having mitigation. But even our consultant is saying the mitigation is probably not complete because, like you said, there are certain things you do at 16 and 75. And so that's my concern about the density is that
You're saying as it gets built out, the mitigation is inadequate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I'm saying because you run into, you just can't do anymore. I mean, like you said, you can't do anything about 1675. You can't do anything about Broad Street because the houses are there. So the question is, at that point, these old houses get hit. So I guess that's my concern is that we're kind of getting back to what I said earlier in the meeting. We're kind of at a tipping point. How much more units can we take without having substantial transportation upgrades? That's what I'm getting at is, and that's where I think I agree with the density, but it's even worse now that we don't have the infrastructure to handle the density.
I agree very much with what your comments are, Ted, regarding traffic. It's clear that traffic is, with this project, as best we can mitigate it, that's allowable by law, that there are clear hurdles and challenges that, that this project is going to impact essentially additional aspects, and that that are without the parkway, without taking some of this traffic from the site onto the parkway, which is not in place at this time. Staff, we're still early planning phases of the parkway.
Depends on which side you're talking about. Yeah,
Okay.
Parkway West is in the next decade. And then Parkway East, by the time I retire.
So early planning stages.
Yeah.
and I get it. That there are elements that this property brings that actually I think actually do have some tones of positivity, but at the same time, is it comprehensive with our Waxhaw vision and land use plan? I think it falls short.
Yeah, I would add, I would say it's a great start. It's got a lot of components that I was excited about. It's the first time I've seen it. So it's not at the January meeting. So I think it has some components that are appealing. But to your point, Dan, it's a little short and it's inconsistent.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, I guess we're at a junction where we need to make a motion, and I believe, just judging off of the tenor of the conversation, we're at a motion of a negative recommendation.
Make a motion for unfavorable recommendation for CD 002-2023 to the Board of Commissioners, as it is not consistent with our 2021 land use plan.
Perfect. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second it.
Awesome. Anybody have any dissents? All those in favor for the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Yeah. Jumping into essentially our last item, and our item is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
I second that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
He did. He